everyone, I'm Bets Golden. Today I'm going to be working in my fabulous art journal again. Not because I'm doing anything fabulous in it, but it's the Art by Marlene art journal. And I really like it because you can pull the pages out like this. I'm going to be using a technique that I like to do when I want to stand the lines with watercolor, because that's not always easy to do. So I am using the stamping platform. It's the Perfect Press, I think is the name of it. I really like it because you can maneuver that paper all around in there. And I just took my static little pouch, it's kind of full of powder, and I ran it all over that because I'm going to be embossing. Now, how to do this little trick is you're going to want to use clear embossing powder and then a clear embossing ink and a black embossing powder. You don't want to do black embossing ink with clear embossing powder because that pigment from the black will leak over into your watercolor. So it's super important that you use a clear embossing ink, and then it will not leak through. And you can use any color embossing powder. I like to use the black with this particular journaling page that I'm doing, but if you want to do something different, you totally can. The most important thing is to definitely make sure that your embossing ink is clear. All right, so I'm stamping this out. Now, even though this is clear, I can see where that is going to lay. And as you can tell, at first I did the black and I'm like, whoops, and thank goodness it's dried out so that I can go back through and do it with the clear. But, since it is clear, you can't tell exactly where it lays. So I think I got a pretty good coverage, although on my little mermaid on the top, I'm noticing that I think there might be splotchy areas. You can kind of tell there is a faint outline of the image on your substrate, in this instance on my page, so I can see it, and so I just keep working it until I get it to my liking. And this is why I like to use this stamping platform, because it holds it all in place and I don't end up with fuzzy lines. So once I have it with my clear embossing ink, I can't stress that enough, you guys, this will not be pretty if you use a pigmented ink, trust me on this. You're going to want to go over it with your black embossing powder or whatever color you want. It doesn't matter, because when you emboss it, what this is going to do is it actually dries to like a plastic. So none of that pigment or color is going to leak through into your watercolor or your water play. So that's why it's super important that your ink is clear and your powder is what has the color. All right, so now that I've done this, I'm actually going to create the background first using some of my Distress Oxides. I'm going in a second time with the Salty Ocean Distress ink. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to do some stenciling on the bottom, but I wanted the top also to blend in. And so I layered that first set of colors down, and by spraying it with water, it softened it and helped it blend. But now I'm going to go in with this really cool stencil, and I'm actually going to lift some of the color simply by spraying it with some water and then dabbing it with my baby wipe like I'm doing right there. And that's going to leave a nice subtle design on the bottom of this paper. Now that I have my background done, and I like to do that before I start to layer on my watercolor, because since I'm using water to work with the background, I know that if I lay watercolor on top of it, it's going to be okay, versus if I get my watercolor placement perfect and then I go back through and I start to spritz it, it can mess with my placement or my shading on my watercolor. So that's why I want to layer on my background first. So all I do now is I just simply take, and I'm using my watercolor color brush that is really cool. You just fill it up with some water. This is how I like to use it in my palette. And everything I'm using can be found down below in the description box. So make sure you check out all my links. I do have them provided there for you for your convenience. And if I can find a direct link, and I think I can on everything in this video, it's going to be there. So what this does, this is that little trick I was telling you about. When you emboss your image and then you color it in, the embossing, actually the little line leaves a ridge. So it's like the water kind of pools right where you want it to go. And that line holds it from leaking and bleeding out. Now you're going to notice that when I do the little thing she's holding down there, that I apply a lot of color to one of them. And it does leak out slightly, but it's nothing horrible. And as I'm doing this, it also is a resist. So if I paint over something, and you're going to notice on her top, the gal that's swimming by, I'm actually going to end up shading that in that really pretty shiny red. And when it first goes on, it's going to look like, whoa. But then you just have to go through and dab up the excess, and boom, it goes where it's supposed to go, and the lines stay true. So it makes watercoloring so much easier if you're a beginner. This is such an easy technique. It's pretty foolproof. And the only thing you got to remember is that ink color. It has to be clear. Otherwise, the water will pull in whatever pigment is from the ink that you use to emboss with. There is some of the Distress Oxide throughout a little bit of like her arms and things, but I've discovered that as I just kind of paint over it like it's not there, it really ends up blending in nicely to the page. So don't let that stop you. You can always go back through with a wet paintbrush before you lay down your color and paint over the areas on your image that have the Distress Oxide, and see if you can't just lift some of it. That totally can work too if you're really nervous about it. But otherwise, this turned out really, really cute, as you'll be able to tell as I finish up this painting. have to add some journaling to it. This was what I wanted to put on this page from the beginning. And basically, I'm using my very favorite journaling pen. It works gorgeous on a substrate like this. And this paper in this art journal is a heavy duty mixed media paper. There's a tooth to it and it's very thick. So writing on top of something like that, especially if you have ink or paint laid down, can be a challenge. And this pen works great. You do want to let it dry a little bit after you're done because it can smear. But other than that, it's a really great pen. I have that down below as well. So the journaling piece basically says, don't worry if you're making waves simply by being yourself. The moon does it all the time. And then after I got done writing that, I went back through because I don't really like my handwriting, and I added little dots all over the letters just to make it look a little bit more whimsical. And then I'm just going to put on some bling because, you know, this really isn't done in my eyes. And I add 3 different types of gems from the Art by Marlene little gem pack right over there. And then I also go through and add some white dots with my pen, and then also some black dots with my food ball pen that I did the journaling in. So black and white can really add a grounding element to art. So I didn't feel like the journaling was enough and it needed to have a little something more. And once I get it done, I think it leads the eye nicely through the page. So that's why I added it. But it's totally up to you on if you want to do that or not. I like to sometimes, but it's not necessary. And with that addition of the little black and white dots, I am done with this page. I think it turned out super cute. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. Like I said, I have all the supplies listed. And if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. I'm just going to pop it right back into my journal. I think this is going to be a sea-themed journal. Until next time, I'm Beth Golden.